Good morning, everyone. Anna here, and welcome back to Virgo. I want to take just a second before we dive in because March feels different. I don't know how else to say it. There's something in the air right now that is unlike anything we've moved through in a while. It's like the world has been holding its breath for months. Maybe you have too, and something is finally beginning to exhale. So if you've been waiting, if you've been patient in ways that cost you something, if you've been doing the quiet, invisible work of holding yourself together while hoping things would shift, this one is for you. Grab a moment, settle in, take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and if this is speaking to your heart, subscribe because we go deep here and I want you along for every bit of it. Let's see what's unfolding. March has a particular personality. It doesn't announce itself the way January does, all sharp edges and declarations and the clean, almost aggressive energy of beginning. And it doesn't carry the weight of February with all its complicated feelings about love and what love means and whether you have enough of it and whether the love you do have looks the way it was supposed to look. March arrives differently. March is the month of the slow thaw, of ground that has been frozen for longer than it wanted to be, beginning incrementally, almost invisibly, to soften. Of light that comes back, not all at once, but in small daily increments, a few more minutes each morning, a slightly warmer quality to the afternoon, until one day you step outside and realize something has genuinely changed and you couldn't have told you exactly when it happened. That is the energy that seems to be working itself through your life right now. Not a dramatic reversal, not a single moment that changes everything in an instant, but a slow, persistent, deeply felt shift, the kind that has been building underneath the surface for longer than the surface has been willing to show. And in the middle of all of it, at the center of what is forming there, is someone thinking about you. Not casually, not in passing, but in the way that certain thoughts think themselves repeatedly, insistently, with a kind of weight that the thinker cannot fully explain and has perhaps stopped trying to. Let's start at the beginning of what has been decided, because there is something important in that word, decided. Not hoped, not wished, not considered, and then set aside. Decided. There is a finality to it that is worth honoring, worth sitting with, worth letting yourself actually feel rather than immediately explaining away. Oh. Decisions of the heart are not like other decisions. They don't happen at a desk or in a meeting or with a list of pros and cons laid out in tidy columns. They happen in the body first, in the chest, in the stomach, in the particular quality of stillness that arrives when something that has been argued over for a long time finally stops being argued over. When the last piece of resistance simply dissolves, not because it was defeated, but because it became unnecessary, because what is true became undeniable enough that the resistance had nothing left to hold on to. Something like that has happened recently in the inner life of someone who is connected to you. Something that had been held in suspension, kept deliberately unresolved, circled around, approached, and then retreated from, has finally been allowed to land, to settle, to become simply a fact. And the fact is this: you matter to this person in a way they can no longer pretend is casual. Think about what it takes to finally make peace with a feeling you have been resisting. It takes time, first of all, more time than anyone ever wants to admit, Because resistance doesn't dissolve the moment you decide to stop resisting, it unravels slowly, thread by thread, each one releasing only when it's ready. You can want to be over something or past something or clear about something and still find that the wanting is not enough to make it so. The heart operates on its own schedule. It arrives at its conclusions in its own time, through its own particular process, and it cannot be rushed by the mind, no matter how urgently the mind demands resolution. This person has been in that process, perhaps for longer than you know, perhaps in ways that haven't been visible from the outside because the most significant interior work rarely is. The conversations that matter most are the ones we have with ourselves, in the dark, in the quiet, when no one is watching and there is no performance required. This person has been having those conversations, and something in those conversations has shifted. The argument they were making against their own feelings has quietly lost its force. The reasons they were holding on to the practical ones, the protective ones, the ones that were really just fear dressed up in reasonable clothing, have one by one become less convincing, until what remains is simply the feeling itself, unadorned, unarguable, impossible to continue setting aside. What remains is you, the thought of you, the persistent, returning, will not be managed thought of you. There is a texture to being someone's recurring thought that is unlike almost any other experience of intimacy. It is invisible. It leaves no trace in the physical world. It produces no evidence, creates no record, generates no proof that anyone could point to and say, here, this is where they were, this is what they were thinking, this is how much space you were taking up in them without their permission. And yet, it is perhaps the most intimate thing one person can do for another. Hold them in their mind, return to them again and again, grant them residence in the private spaces where nothing performative is possible. Uh, you are living in those spaces for this person right now, not as a passing thought, not as a what if that gets entertained briefly and then dismissed, but as something closer to a presence, the way certain places stay with you, the exact quality of light in a particular room, the way a city smells in a specific season, the feeling of being somewhere that felt inexplicably and immediately like somewhere you belonged. You don't choose to remember those things. They simply remain. They have decided to remain. That is the category you occupy for this person. Something that has simply decided to remain now, and this is worth taking a moment with. March has a relationship with honesty that other months don't quite share. There is something about the turning of the season, about the physical world visibly changing around us, that has a way of making pretense feel more exhausting than usual. When the world is actively becoming something new, when the evidence of change is literally outside the window, in the trees, in the temperature, in the quality of the light, it becomes harder to maintain the fiction that nothing in your own inner life is also changing. Um, the energy of this month has a way of surfacing what has been submerged, of bringing to the visible layer things that have been living below it, not because they are forced up, but because the conditions finally become right for them to rise on their own. Like seeds that have been in the ground all winter, waiting not for permission, but for warmth, for the specific combination of conditions that makes emergence not just possible, but inevitable. Something feels ready to emerge. not everything, not all at once, but something specific, something that has been held beneath the surface of a particular connection or a particular silence or a particular unfinished conversation seems to be moving toward the light, slowly, carefully, but unmistakably. Let's talk about thinking about someone romantically, because this deserves more than a passing mention. Romantic thought is not just thought with emotion attached. It is a specific kind of cognitive and physical experience that involves the whole body, not just the mind. When someone thinks about another person romantically, there is chemistry involved, actual, measurable, physical chemistry. There is warmth. There is a quality of attention that differs entirely from the way we think about problems to be solved, or tasks to be completed, or even people we care about in non romantic ways. Romantic thought has a softness to it, an involuntary softness, the kind that arrives without being invited and changes the texture of the entire moment. The way the body relaxes slightly around certain memories. The way certain mental images produce a warmth in the chest that is entirely distinct from other kinds of warmth. The way a name, heard unexpectedly, can stop time for just a fraction of a second while everything inside orients toward it like a plant orienting toward light. This person is experiencing all of that when they think of you. The involuntary softness, the warmth, the fraction of a second stop. These are not things that can be chosen or manufactured. They are the body's honest response to something the heart has already quietly acknowledged, that this is not nothing, that this has not been nothing for a long time. And here is what makes March particularly significant for all of this. March is not a month of waiting, it is a month of movement. Slow movement, yes. Incremental movement, certainly, but movement nonetheless. The earth doesn't wait for perfect conditions to begin its thaw. It begins when the temperature changes, imperfectly, unevenly, with some days still carrying frost and other days offering a warmth that feels almost like a promise. What is forming around you follows that same rhythm. It will not arrive in one clean, unambiguous gesture. It will come in pieces, in the slightly longer pause before a response, in the message that was started and reconsidered and started again, in the way someone's eyes find you in a room before they've consciously decided to look, in the quality of attention that is just slightly different from what it was before, more present, more deliberate, more willing to stay. These are small things, easy to miss, easy to explain away if you are practiced at explaining things away. But they are not small. They are the early signs of something that has been decided, evidence of an interior shift that is beginning carefully and at its own pace to find its way into the exterior world, into behavior, into presence, into the specific, unmistakable quality of someone who has made up their mind. There is something else here, something that sits underneath all of this and is perhaps the most important thing to say. You have been waiting for something to shift. Not passively, you have not been doing nothing. You have been doing the hardest kind of work, which is the work of continuing, of showing up for your own life while something unresolved lived at the edges of it, of keeping yourself whole and moving and present, even while carrying the weight of something uncertain. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, an enormous thing. And it tends to go unrecognized because it produces no visible result, no artifact, no achievement, no moment you can point to and say, here, I did something. And but the inner work of continuing, of not collapsing the uncertainty prematurely into either hope or resignation, of staying open without being destabilized, of holding space for something without demanding that it resolve on your timeline, that is a kind of strength that very few people talk about because it is so quiet and so invisible and so absolutely essential. You have been doing that work. And March seems to be the month where that work begins to find its reflection, where the patience is met with something, where the continuing produces, finally, a visible result, not because you forced it, not because you performed your way into it, but because the conditions have finally shifted enough that what was ready to emerge is beginning to do so. Think for a moment about what it might feel like to receive what is forming, not to analyze it, not to immediately assess its reliability or longevity or what it means for the future, but just to receive it, to let something that has been in motion toward you finally arrive without immediately moving it through the filter of skepticism or past experience or the protective machinery you have built over years of learning to be careful. Uh, there may be a part of you that wants to be guarded, that remembers very clearly the last time something felt like this and then became something different. That wants proof before it will allow itself to feel anything. That has learned through real and legitimate experience that the feeling of something shifting is not the same as the thing actually shifting, and that hope deployed too early can be its own kind of weight to carry. That part of you is not wrong. It came from somewhere real. It has served a purpose. But there is a difference between wisdom and armor, between healthy discernment and the kind of preemptive closure that protects you from disappointment by also protecting you from the full experience of something good. And what may be arriving now, what seems to already be in motion, may be worth allowing past the armor. Not all the way, not recklessly, but enough to actually feel it, enough to let it register in the place where real things register. So, as you move through March, through these particular days, this particular quality of light, this particular turning of the season, carry this awareness with you gently. Something has been decided, not by you or not only by you, but by someone else in their own time, through their own process, arrived at their own conclusion. And the conclusion has your name in it, has your face in it, has the specific, irreplaceable quality of you at the center of it. You don't need to do anything dramatic with that. You don't need to accelerate it or test it or demand that it prove itself before it has had the chance to fully arrive. You only need to remain available to yourself, to what is forming, to the possibility that March might offer you something that the long, difficult months before it were preparing you to receive. The thaw is real. The warmth is returning. And the thought of you, persistent, romantic, decided, is alive in someone's chest right now in a way they are no longer trying to talk themselves out of. That is not nothing. That is, in the quiet vocabulary of real feeling, quite a lot. Let it be what it is. Let yourself be where you are. And let March do what March has always done, bring back the light, one small increment at a time, until the whole landscape looks different and you wonder how you ever saw it any other way. Something real is on its way to you, and you are finally, after everything, ready to receive it.